Hello and welcome to Project 4, in which we're going to be covering the Creswell reading on qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method approaches and how it relates to your proposal of methodology for this project. So, as you know, Creswell covers three types of designs: qualitative research, quantitative research, and mixed methods. And he talks about how they allow one to create a research design where one plans or proposes to conduct research, and how that type of design, depending on the qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods approach that you use, actually provides you with a kind of philosophical worldview of what research should do. How research should be conducted, the strategies you use to conduct research and do inquiry, and the methods that one might propose or actually conduct when, a full member of your academic discourse community. Right, so there's 4 worldviews for research, and Creswell covers this as well. Post-positivism. Positivism is a belief system in which numbers and data rule the day, and subjective, personal, and observational information is not in any way seen as being appropriate nor effective research material. Now, positivism is certainly still a approach used typically in quantitative and mixed method studies, but it does tend to at least consider some of the ways in which information is kind of predetermined determination, which means kind of like we already believe certain things and we won't question them, or reductionism, in which we kind of say, for instance, a really good example of reductionism in the medical field that was kind of toppled over was where we used to only use males and men in any of our medical research, and then we found out that women respond very differently to heart attacks than men do, and strokes and so forth. And so we had reduced or created reductionism by only looking at one kind of gender when conducting research and saying, yes, this is how all heart attacks occur, these are the symptoms always, and we're finding that we're wrong, right? But positivism, again, used in quantitative and mixed methods, uses empirical observations and measurements quite often, and in fact almost all the time, and uses theory to verify their approaches to their research. Constructivism tends to want to understand why things occur. It wants to go deeper into kind of the meanings of certain information. This is very much used in qualitative research or mixed methods research, very much used in social sciences, humanities, psychology, these kinds of things. It believes in multiple participant meanings, so this would be where, say, in a positivist research approach, I might conduct interviews that only provide me with yes or no answers. I want to know what I want to know, and that's all I want to know. Whereas in a constructivist approach, one might want to have open-ended interviews and questions so that I can find out more than I was hoping to find, or my viewpoints might change, or I get an understanding of how I view information and how my participants view the world or information. Very much interested in social and historical connections, and again uses theory for its research, but it likes to generate a theory. So based on all of these observations and information and insights that I found, I've now developed a theory as to why this occurs, rather than saying, here's a theory, I'm going to place it onto this demographic of people, and I'm going to force it to make sense of what these people do, right? Again, another one would be advocacy and participatory types of research. Again, this tends to be more qualitative or mixed methods. It looks very much at the political side of research. For instance, one might consider why on, a document that asks you for your demographics, are there only 5 boxes of nationalities or race that I can check off, right? What does it say politically? What does that empower and not empower? It does ask for research that allows for empowerment of individuals and for collaboration between participants within that research, and hopes to enact some kind of change, very much politically kind of centered. And then there's pragmatism, which likes to look at the consequences of actions, the problems that have arisen in certain contexts or through certain research, and how that might be fixed. Pluralistic, meaning that it sees everyone as being a part of this kind of consequence and problem, and likes real-world, practical-orientated research questions or methods. And you'll see this very much in, like, say, nursing, social work, education, psychology. Alright, so some of the strategies or methods one would use for the 3 modes of inquiry. In quantitative, it's experimental designs, or you could use non-experimental designs such as surveys or closed yes or no interview kind of questions. So again, a very positivist approach, and it's already has a theory that's leading this research and informing this research and making sense of the data. May have hypotheses, but in a sense hypotheses that have already kind of been proven, and we're trying to prove that this continues in other demographics or genders or locations. For qualitative, it's narrative research. This means that we're very interested in the texts and the communications and the words and the perceptions of the participants in which we are observing and researching. Very much interested in phenomenon. What happens in a classroom that's integrated ESL students who cannot speak any English? How does the teacher teach all of these students? How do students react? How do they learn? Ethnographies, that means ethnographic research, where you go in and you actually observe, you become a part of that group, you, as objectively as possible, record everything that is occurring and then analyze that information. Grounded theory studies, this means that we don't come in with a preconceived notion or theory of what we're going to find, but rather from what we've observed and gathered and analyzed, we then come up with a theory as to why that occurs. Case studies, where you may look at a certain group of individuals and how they respond to certain research questions. Again, this could be very much in education and psychology. And this mixed methods, which mixes quantitative and qualitative. So, it's sequential in that it might start with qualitative and move to quantitative or back. It's concurrent in meaning that it attempts to connect both to show that both forms of research methods are valid and let us see different things. And it's transformative in that it kind of allows one to see both the subjective and the objective nature of research. Right, moving on. So in quantitative research methods, as we said, it's predetermined theory, predetermined methods, instrument-based with questions. We tend to look at performance, attitude, observational data, census data, statistical data, and analysis and interpretation. Mixed methods, as we said, is in the middle, and so Let's move over to qualitative. Qualitative has emerging methods. We might even not know kind of like how to analyze what we've observed and seen and heard, and we have to come up with some type of way to analyze that, interpret that. They ask open-ended questions. They have interviews, observation. They document everything that they see. Take documents, audio and visually record the data so nothing is missed. They use textual and image analysis. So they might analyze the way that a student writes when they're first being introduced to their discourse community's way of writing and what that student or students grapple with. Or they might analyze, film and what that says about our culture. And they look for themes and patterns for interpretation. So back to mixed methods, they both predetermine and look at emerging methods. So they have a game plan for how they might analyze the data, but also allow themselves to see emerging methods that are cropping up that might be needed to further analyze that data. They use both open and closed-ended questions. They use multiple forms of data, both quantitative, qualitative, which kind of opens up the larger range of possibilities of how one can see and analyze and interpret that data. They use both statistical and textual-based analysis, and they tend to use large database systems for inputting and computing their information for analysis. All right, so we've kind of gone over this before. You can look this at your leisure, but qualitative is very constructivist and participatory, very open-ended. Quantitative, positivist, closed, I have a theory already. Mixed method mirrors the two. Right. So what type of researcher might we find in these types of research methods? For qualitative research, they place themselves within that area of research. They become a part of that group, that information. They collect their participants' information and the meanings behind the statements or actions, or they're very interested in what participants have to say. They will bring personal values into the study. This is one reason why people who do quantitative research see qualitative research as being controversial. Now, the thing is that if you do qualitative research and you indicate that, yes, my personal values did in fact influence this study in these ways, and you're honest about it, some would say that that's more honest than quantitative research, where I'm predetermining, imposing my viewpoints, but kind of hiding behind a cloak of, objectivity. So therefore, they validate accuracy of findings, and very often will have other colleagues or researchers look at their data, analyze their data, to be certain that what the researcher is finding matches what an outsider who is objective is looking at and finding. And usually creates an agenda for change or reform and a collaboration. For quantitative, there's the testing and verification of theories and explanations. So I'm going to replicate these methods, but at a different location or with a different demographics, or I'm going to use a predetermined theory for the analysis of my methods, and that's how I'm going to view this information, and I won't vary from that. Looks at variables and studies them, relates those variables to questions or hypotheses that have been generated from the theory that one is using. Uses standards of validity and reliability through statistical analysis. Again, if anybody has taken stats, you will know that statistics can be very subjective in nature as well. So, observes and measures information in a numerical way rather than an kind of like ethnographic, observational, participatory measure, uh, is said to use unbiased approaches. Some would